who may be new to this meeting, it does stream live on YouTube, so just be aware of that. Why don't we? I'll call the meeting to order of the Legislative Committee of the City of Salem City Council for July 28, 2023. President are Hoy.
Stapleton. Nishioka.
All right, and then we have. Why don't we go around the room also just for the benefit of the new folks? So we'll do staff introductions as well. Keith, would you like to start? Your next call.
Brian Martin, Public Works Director.
Daniel Baum, Executive Assistant to Mayor Hoy. Justin Martin, Government Relations.
Courtney Knox Bush here in this Mayor and City Manager's office behind Justin's head.
Jason Pulley, Public Works.
No, yeah, you can't see us there.
That's right.
Sarah Long, Urban Development.
Jessica Blakely, Salem Housing Authority.
Trevor Keys, Salem Police Department. Anthony Kamalo, Public Works Transportation Planner.
Josh Eggleston, Chief Financial Officer with Finance.
Ryan Zink, Budget Office and Utility Franchise Administrator.
Mark Langston in the Legal Department.
We do have more room at the table if anybody's interested in coming in. Sure.
And Greg Hadley is also on Assistant Fire Chief.
Yes. Folks online, would you like to do introductions, please?
Well, good morning, I guess. Yeah. Greg Hadley, Fire.
Great. Mark?
Mark Dedrick with Summit Strategies, and I just see my colleagues are around the corner in the conference room. I may go join them rather than holding up in my office here. Good to see everyone.
Good
Terry Hubert, Summit Strategies.
And I'm Kat Abrams with Summit Strategies.
Thank you so much for joining us all today. Let's see. So we're going to go right into updates and information sharing. I'm going to turn it over to Courtney to kind of lead that.
Well, for today, what we want to do is make sure that everybody is aware that we have our federal lobbyists. And I was hoping that Mark, you and Terry would do some introductions and more detailed about who you are and what you bring. And then we can have a quick update on last session and then start really an iterative process planning for project and policy priorities for both our state and our federal agendas in the next sessions. So Mark, Terry, do you want to do a quick background on Summit?
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to do that. For those who haven't met me, Mark Dedrick, founding partner at Summit Strategies. Summit is a kind of small, mid-size boutique lobbying firm. We are headquartered in Portland, Oregon. We have offices in Portland and Washington, D.C. All three people you see on the screen here in front of you are in our Washington, D.C. office. We do a lot of work with public governments, with cities, counties, public ports, regional governments, state agencies, things of that nature. We do a lot of work in kind of the transportation, economic development kind of field. Those are kind of some of the main areas that we work on. I am a founding partner of Summit. We started in the beginning of 2015. Before that, the 5 partners who started Summit spun off from the Portland-based, the government affairs practice group from the Portland law firm Ball Janik. Before that, going back, I'm a native Oregonian. I'm born and raised in Marion County in Silverton, Oregon. Lived in Salem for 4 years. I went to Willamette University. And I've been in Washington, D.C. since 1997, worked for 3 different members of Congress, including 2 stints with Congresswoman Darlene Hooley, who represented the city of Salem there. So worked a lot with the city during my time there. And I've been lobbying since 2006. So very excited to be kind of on the Salem team here and to be representing you all out here. Have spent a lot of good time with Courtney and with other folks with the city, kind of learning more about your priorities, your vision for where the city is going to be going, and working on how we can kind of best assist you all to connect you with your goals and visions with what the federal opportunities are out here to try and be as successful as possible. So I'll throw it to Terry and Kat for a little bit more substantial introduction.
Yeah, so my name is Kat. I'm a legislative assistant with Summit Strategies. I was brought onto the team in January after working Governor Kotek's campaign last fall. I was on her fundraising team. Before that, I was a student at University of Oregon, so I also am an Oregonian, born and raised. I worked the state legislative session the past 6 months and then came out here to DC to start doing some more federal work with Summit.
Terry Hubert, I'm the token non-Oregonian in the group. I grew up I grew up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and went to the College of Worcester in Ohio, and then came to Washington in 1998 following graduation. I worked for Tom Ridge, who was then governor of Pennsylvania, and then when he left after 9/11, went to the White House. I worked for Mark Schweiker and led the Pennsylvania office down here for the remainder of the term that was available at about 2 years. And then went into private lobbying practice, and I worked for a firm that you may have heard of called CFM, which is out of Portland. And I worked there for about 4 years, which is where I met Mark when I was lobbying him. I represented at that point, one of the clients was Marion County and another one was Chariots, the mass transit authority there in Salem. So I got to know Oregon and Salem a bit through that work, but then I left CFM and spent 17 years with a Pittsburgh-based law firm doing very similar work representing municipal authorities, cities, counties, those sort of things throughout the country, and joined Summit about 1.5 years ago. And very excited to be returning back to having some reasons to go back to Oregon again and see all you guys and work with you.
Thanks, everybody.
So now, Justin, do you want to, this is going to be a little bit of a different vibe. Do you want to talk to us a little bit about the session and where we are, where we ended? Because we are docketing for the rest of you. We're putting a report on the August 14th agenda that will round out the session. So you'll get the full blow by blow on each of the bills that you took action to support or oppose. So that whole thing will come to you later, but the short version is from Justin. Yeah.
Well, you already took care of my first bullet point. Perfect. Everybody will be getting the final report here by the next meeting, and a couple of reasons you don't have it yet. One, we're compiling all the things, but we're also waiting on the governor, right? She's got a few things still on her desk. No point in putting out a report that's incomplete. To that point, again, if anybody wants some reading material that'll put you to sleep, you can go through that thing, before you go to bed at night. But the importance of that document is not so much to focus on the past, but to be able to look at it and know what we're going to face in the future. So it'll be something I'll be going over with the federal team. And as we kind of switch gears today and spend the majority of our time looking at priorities and what we really want to go after, and then narrowing that down into the next session, that's always a good guide, because we know we'll see this again. We know this is going to come up again. Hey, this almost made it over the finish line, so its probability is pretty good this next session. And then we can plan for that. So it's really a strategic document that we can utilize to plan for the future. So as Courtney mentioned, that'll be here before, I think, our August 28th meeting. Next, just a quick report. It wasn't a great session for us. We've lost a lot of influence within the process. That's not to say our folks aren't wonderful, and we continue to have that dialogue with them. It's just a matter of we're not in a position as a city with the big 8, right? So we lost the Senate president. That's a problem. That's not an excuse. But again, we've lost a lot of influence in that building. It's our job as your staff and as your representatives to make sure we continue those relationships, help them along within their process and their learning curve and their growth in the legislative process. And that's what we'll do in the interim. People always ask me, what do lobbyists do during the interim? Well, lobbyists really get their work done. So when we go into that legislative session, we've got our priorities in a funnel. We know we're not asking for too many things. We've got a narrow focus, and it's our job to educate these elected officials why it's good for them, why it's good for their constituents, why it's good for the state, and why it's good for our city. So it's just part of the process, and this is what we do. Election cycles will ramp up right here after Labor Day, and so we've got those opportunities to really do that education piece. So that being said, the final thing is I know the mayor's had some good conversations with the governor. We saw some good press this morning from the governor talking about some payment in lieu of taxes, talking about her understanding the need that we have in and around our community, and we're looking forward to that. We know a lot of things are still on her plate. That's great going forward. We got the housing stuff worked out. Great job with Jessica and other folks that reached out to the governor's office to make sure that we got that done, because affordable housing is critical, not just in our community, but throughout the state. So that really fit in with that as well. I've had a couple difficult conversations with some of our electeds, Speaker Hayfield, who I consider, a good friend and a good relationship, to let him know that, we still have these issues and we will be back. I'm with him here in another couple of weeks, so we will have another frank discussion. But again, we got to turn the corner and we got to figure out how we can fit into their plans and what they want to do in terms of objectives going into the next legislature in 24 and even more so 25. So with that is my report, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
Do you have anything else you want to add just from your perspective?
Well, just to get a little bit detailed for a second. So yesterday we had a bill signing ceremony on some housing bills, and one of those bills was the direct result of the situation with Orchard Park. That's the 224 unit building out in northeast Salem that we were able to save into affordability through a lot of help with a lot of people in this room and the governor's office and folks. But this bill was Orchard Park was the driver of this bill, and we have another unit, 112 units that are going to be impacted by this bill, and we think that we'll be able to save into affordability. So that's 336 units right here in our city that are going to be directly impacted by this legislation. It's already having a positive impact because the tenants are being notified well in advance, which wasn't the case with Orchard Park, that they could be subject to falling out of affordability. So it's having so I just wanted to mention it because, our work has real world, real life consequences, and sometimes in a really positive way. And this is one of those, thanks to Jessica and all the folks at Salem Housing Authority who really did the detail work to make that happen. So I just kind of wanted to mention that. And did you want to highlight anything else from yesterday from the bills that the governor signed?
No, 3042 was definitely one of our focuses just because of the Orchard Park situation, but Senate Bill 611 is one that the council supported as well, which reduces the amount that landlords can increase rent at a cap of 10%, which was an eviction prevention measure, which I felt was very important too. The budget piece was huge. That was a
HCS got their budget signed yesterday.
Investment into housing, and we are very excited to see how that plays into different buckets. And overall, it looks like there's going to be opportunities for us to utilize that funding and build some additional housing.
Yeah. Thank you, Jessica.
Thank you for that. So as we, on the theme of turning the corner into preparing for the next round, what you have before you is a high level list of things that could become part of our policy agenda for state and federal in the next round. So what you see in the beginning on the first page is really those things that we as staff and in consultation with our state and federal lobbies, we think these are the most ready in terms of having some kind of a match if required, being farthest along the planning phase of work. And so these are the projects that we would look to start moving and developing further for future funding. There are other project ideas are on the third page. These are things that are not quite ready, but we want you to know that we're thinking about them as possible opportunities for state or federal funding. They're not quite ready either because they don't have a match or because, well, actually there's a quick edit that we have to make, it looks like, but there are just things that we're not quite sure about as being successful candidates just yet, given what we know about the requirements for funding or the size of the project or whatever it is, that it's just not quite ready. Even not quite planned as much as we'd like to be eligible for funding. So we are prepared to answer any questions you might have, but I'd like to, if we could, go through the list a little bit. And then where we're really looking for your input is on the policy priorities, because there's quite a long list of ideas that we might pursue. And we want to make sure that we're positioning those as well for success. And that would take more work as we start to refine the list. So this is an iterative process. It's not intended to be finished today, but it is intended to help us continue to sort and march through and create that funnel that Justin is referencing. So, so we have a couple of water infrastructure projects at the top. These are projects that we think are mostly ready. And if you have any questions about the water treatment plant, bridge access, the 7th Street water line, or the upper and lower Bennett dams, just ask. We have lots of folks who can help. Yes.
So on the dams, do we only have 2 dams, upper and lower, or are there others within the system?
Many other.
Okay,
Well, I mean, for water supplies, just those two. I mean, we have the Waller Dam, which is another issue in itself, but yeah, just those two.
All our stormwater, is pretty, and there's other things happening.
That's the one over near State Street, that
Yeah.
whole issue with the silt and the, yeah, okay.
Mill race. And
Yeah.
everything else.
so those are different.
Those are different.
And those, we know their age and their infrastructure struggles, and we know how much it's gonna cost.
Yes.
And that's a future project.
For which one? I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry, that was a question. Those other dams besides the upper and lower.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
But what I will say about the upper and lower is these are going to be a critical project because these directly affect our water intake. And so there's, the river shifting, gravel bars are cutting off our water supply. So we're putting a bunch of energy into this now to get better information to go forward with grants.
I did have a chat with the city manager from Staten recently, and she is, I think they're important partners in that conversation because they have a vested interest in what as well in that whole dam conversation. So I do think we need to get them involved. I think, and there's, it's the more the merrier when it comes to lobbying. And so I know the city of Staten is interested in joining us in that conversation.
And I just want to point out that we're joint owners. We don't own them outright. So the Sandiam Water Control District is also an owner in both of those dams, just so everybody's aware of that.
Yeah.
Fully supportive. I wanted to ask broader questions about the system. Thank you.
Okay. And then we have some bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure projects, things that we're kind of targeting as safety for all modes. And you can see that we've had conversations about trying to group some of the priorities. There are, as we've talked about in the bond work, there are too many priorities for us to fund. So we're looking at how to better package some of them because they're too small individually. Some of them are larger, but just looking for ways to package a set of these opportunities for some of these federal grants. And I'm sure if you have any questions, we can talk about them. Winter Maple Bikeway, it's a really big project, but if we can focus on the north end, that's the most ready. We can get that probably into a queue for future funding. And then South River Road slide mitigation. This is one that may be eligible for a Protect grant, and that would be something that would, if we make that determination in the next couple of days, would be moving to the August 14th packet for your approval. But we have a couple more little I's and T's.
I'm confused as to, so those two projects you just mentioned, Maple Winter and also River Road are listed on the front page, and then they're also on.
That's the error I just.
Oh, okay.
That's what you mean.
Okay, thank you.
And was the funding for the pedestrian bridge over 22 also supposed to be on this page or?
That one is a timing question because and I'm going to say this and you're going to make me better. It's, as I understand it, it's a refinement plan. So it's not fully developed or designed. And so it's not eligible for project funding yet. But we do know, and we have it in the queue.
The grant that we got is just for design. It's just for planning. It's not for, it's not for action.
For design.
Oh, it's not for
It's
design.
a refinement plan, which is a step towards design. So as I understand it, it's in the queue.
Basically.
It's in the queue, but it's not.
It's basically like looking at investigating possible alignments, location, public outreach, talking to folks out there. There's still a lot of work, like preliminary groundwork that needs to go for that project. Up to and including conversations with the school district on that, so still very early on in that process. Yeah.
But what we're trying to do here is to show you that we have a queue, right? So my question has been, hey, what's after McGilchrist? And so there's so many.
That's something we probably should have put on our list for yesterday's meeting without
Yes, but we ended up, I think, talking about it briefly.
Yeah.
okay.
I was also thinking about downtown parking as we were leaving, but there's so much to talk about, so little time.
Yeah.
So what I do, just what we're trying to do is have a more clear step progression for these projects so that everyone has greater awareness about what we're working on and what we're planning to get into the queue. So just documenting timing, I think, has a little bit of value too.
Is Brian going to say more about the grant opportunity?
Yeah, for the South River Road.
Yeah.
So with that being a $20 million project, and we're looking at this Protect grant, which is an 80-20, 80% federal, 20 local, that 20% local is $4 million. And so as we go forward with this, we thought it'd be prudent to bring that up in this group because we don't have $4 million sitting around that if we were lucky enough to get the grant now. You know, there are options. It's not like you got to pay $4 million on day one. The project takes years to do, and so you could kind of accumulate some funding to cover that grant. You know, an example could be we got $6 million for the Pringle path. Do you say, okay, some of the savings from the bond that doesn't go to that and kind of transfer it over to here? So I haven't talked to Josh about this yet. So putting it in the spot now, or you say try and save $500,000 a year out of the transportation fund, or
Could we use state dollars for the match?
Yes,
Okay.
and that's another option too. It certainly is, I think, and you should correct me, I think it's certainly easier to have a $4 million ask than a $20 million ask for anyone. And so if we are successful with the Protect grant, we could then leverage certainly
Great.
the last mile, the last 4 million.
When do we learn about the Protect?
Well, first we have to apply. August 14th is your review. And then
the school date's either the 18th or the 28th.
yeah, it's really tight in August. And then they have to review and then they have to announce.
Okay.
Based on that.
Feels like we should go for it.
Of course.
Terry and Mark, do you want to say anything more about that one? But I think you were the ones that sort of highlighted it for us.
The Protect grant you're talking about right now?
Yes.
I mean, from what we've seen of the project, it seems to be fully eligible and seems to be competitive. Our only suggestion I think we passed along was to make sure that we don't believe that you already have a project pending in there, but we just always suggest only one project per application pot, just because otherwise you're competing against yourself and likely to hurt yourself. So if you don't have another project pending there, then it seems like it would be a worthy thing to do.
We don't. No, right. We don't have any other applications in for that pot.
Have we ever applied for this grant before?
I don't.
Yeah, I don't really protect one. That was the mayor forwarded that email to me. That was new for me to see. So I don't know if that's a newer one or.
I believe this is a newer grant program, or at least it's it's either that with a new an older grant program was kind of repurposed for this purpose, or it's a brand new grant program. So this wouldn't be something that you all would have a history with. And yeah, in all of our conversations with DOT, like a definite concern there is whether local governments are going to have the capacity to handle the volume of money that they're pumping out of DOT these days. So the encouragement always is like, if your clients have projects that they're able to construct that meet the criteria, they should absolutely apply. And yeah, I mean, with our understanding of your project and this, again, brand new grant program, it seems like a good fit and it seems like a good thing to go after. And yeah, and we can interact a bit more with DOT about it and get more of a sense of it, but I think it's worth going for.
Great.
Thank you. We have a set underneath bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure. We have and safety. We have a parks infrastructure bucket. This again is where our needs far outstrip our resources. And The boardwalks for beavers is kind of funny, and that's primarily why it's here,
Is that a
because,
Dallas project?
because,
These should be boardwalks for Bearcats.
when we,
Come on.
when we've been talking about the parks needs, our friends at Summit thought that this was, you know, it has sticking power and it's funny, and so it might be a good project for us to pitch federally.
And we have so many beavers recently identified in the city, beaver dams, like parks folks have been telling us about, like, this is a big issue in our city, actually.
Yes, and so this project is actually taking the existing pathway that connects to the Peter Portney Minto Island Bridge and raising that onto a boardwalk so that it's able to be used all the time, which is great for commuters and everything else. So that's the idea there. You can see our perennial favorite, Peace Plaza, is on this list as well. And then there's an idea about park path rehabilitation. And much as we discussed the other, the bicycle and the crosswalk projects, this would be about grouping things so that they're eligible for federal funding or for state funding, but going for a package of those improvements instead of just one. There are, of course, many other parks needs, but these are the things that we were most excited about pitching forward. And then you can see the sheltering programs. Those are the same state funding priorities that we had last session and the session before, and we would just continue.
I'm really wondering about the sobering center, since somebody else is sort of taking the lead on that. I'm wondering if we should continue to have that on our list.
It's a good question, and I leave it to you. I think there is an expectation that some other entity would come and help support the operations of that. In a recent conversation with Tim Murphy from Bridgeway, he sounded a little different than the first time it was presented to me as something they had well in hand. It sounded more like they would be looking for, again, 2 years of operating support.
Yeah, I guess my take on that situation is that's aspirational, and we have programs that we actually have to sustain or they're going to close. Yeah. And so I would prefer to focus on those programs that we have critical needs for right now that exist and that will no longer exist if we don't find funding. So I would prefer to eliminate sobering off of our priority list for now.
All right.
That's my take on it.
You have a quorum, so.
Other thoughts?
Yeah, I would agree. And you agree.
Excellent, thank you.
As much as I want a sobering center, at this point, we're not in expansion mode, we're in preservation mode.
I also feel like this borders on not the city's realm.
Right.
I want to be supportive and find ways to be creative in that, whether it's with land or some other way that we can help. But I'm with you on this.
Yeah.
So we'll just put that back on the back page, what I'm calling below the line, so that we are mindful that at one time, we're ready with it should something appear that makes sense, and with your approval.
I just want to, I think we're confusing our delegation by continuing to have it on our list, and I think it dilutes our message. So I would prefer, we were just asked again this morning in a meeting with Senator about it. So, yeah.
Good, thank you for the feedback.
Yep.
Then you can see we lined out a couple of things that we're interested in but are not quite ready. And so you can see sort of a suggested time frame for when we'll have more information and when we might push those forward. So these are the things, if you're I don't know, I'm not gonna have a good analogy, but we know the water infrastructure, bicycle pedestrian, the parks and the sheltering programs, those are things that we know are ready. Then we have a bubble of things that we're preparing or getting ready. And then we have a whole bunch of other things that are in some stage of development, but not ready. If that makes sense.
Can I ask a question about the Kugler widening project?
Yes.
What is our role in that? And also, are we widening things still? I mean, is that where we're going with transportation still?
Well, I understand, widening is kind of like a alarm bell. But the big issue on Cougar especially is the bridges. Right? There's a bridge over the railroad there or the creek. They're real choke points. So even if we just do something bicycle, they're really bad for bikes and pets. So even if we just do something for bikes and pets going over those bridges, That's a real need. Even if we don't want to widen or like just include the bridges for vehicle traffic, like for regular vehicle traffic. There's a need there. But like what we want to identify that need as is, you know, I mean, we have an estimate for one of the bridges, I think it's the one over the creek, to I'm sorry, no, the one over Mission over 22. We have an estimate $4 million just to cantilever some bike and ped facilities. If you've ever driven over that, it's really narrow. It's kind of a harrowing experience for anyone that might.
You're talking about Orton Road over 22?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's rough.
Yeah.
Right. So, so just to add a bike ped facility there, we have an estimate for about $4 million for that. But you can go all the way up to, you know, an interchange there at 22 is a big historic project that there's been a lot of discussion, I know, between the city and ODOT and the county that goes back a long time. And I know there's a lot of political considerations there.
But that wouldn't be a city project.
It depends. It depends, right? So, I know like the interchange has been discussed between everyone, right?
Right.
But if we wanted to do some kind of just a smaller scale, like pet improvement, it probably still would be a conversation with all those partners, right? And not just specifically a city or specifically county or specifically ODOT. Yeah, so.
This might be too nitpicky for this meeting, but I wonder if we need to highlight the bike and ped functions of this project into the title, right? I mean, because we see widening and we just think cars historically, but maybe if we need to change how we're talking about it or even introducing it so that it is more about multimodal transportation.
Sure.
I wonder if that might increase our chances of getting something big.
Sure, it might have.
Yeah, just some 2 cents.
I think what the other issue out there is with the Mill Creek and Upper Center.
Yeah.
The freight vehicles and I mean, there's a lot of congestion on all those trucks, and so
Yeah.
there's congestion that needs.
Yeah, that corporate center, I mean, if you just go to that gas station that's out there, and just look at the number of FedEx and Amazon vehicles that are like piling up out there. Yeah, seriously, it's,
Idea.
and they all go over that very narrow bridge to get to that gas station.
Yeah, it's a big choke point.
Yeah. Okay,
Great. So that concludes the list of things that we think we can be ready with for some sort of agenda. And then we have a whole slew of policy possibilities that have come up through the brainstorming conversations, either with any one of you or with staff. And so these are things for you to consider, give us suggestions about what we might drop if we're aiming again to kind of have a focus for our federal and or state agenda. So we have things like the CIS office siting, that's on the list. The rental assistance demonstration project, that's, I think, a small fix that we would like to continue to advance if that's okay. We have behavioral health support, that's sort of a perennial favorite. Medicaid and Medicare reimbursement eligibility for sheltering. Greater flexibility with CDBG. This we enjoyed during COVID and we'd like to see that continue. We have been supportive of a state towing association issue to try to recoup some of the cost of the RVs that are towed. Recoup some of the cost of destroying those when they're no longer roadworthy. We have payment in lieu of taxes, some trying to capture more with PEG dollars for streaming services as people are moving away from cable. Tax exempt bonds, advanced refunding. I'm gonna totally defer to you. Nobody questions about that. Josh?
So basically, if you issue debt and then the market gets a little bit better, so you used to be able to refund bonds very quickly. Right now you have to wait until the actual call date, so you have to wait longer to refund. So it just gives the city greater flexibility to take advantage of the market conditions.
this isn't specific to this item, but more internal to this list. It would be really helpful to me if this were separated out between state and local, because my mind is like, it's bouncing back and forth. I'm like, is that it's like ping pong. It's like that state, is that federal, is that state? I mean,
Yes.
oh, and maybe some are both, which is fine, but it would be helpful for me if we could just distinguish those lists so we can know like where to focus our questions and that sort of thing. Is it folks from Summit, or is it Justin, or where, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
So yeah,
We can separate those out.
thank you.
This is just sort of a spaghetti hitting the wall.
Yeah, I get that.
And so that's what we're looking for, is any, oh, that's not a priority for the city, or any kind of feedback like that, or if we're missing some things.
Well, that's again, like, so to my question, like I have questions before I know whether it's a thing, like the USCIS office, that is something I would very much like to see happen, but I don't know if that's appropriate, like for a federal agenda, or is that just a lobbying effort? I don't, to individual members of Congress, I don't know how to best advocate for that. I mean, I know I've written a letter to our delegation, but like beyond that, is there a role for the city? And if so, what is that role?
Would you like to answer that question, Mark or Terry?
I think Mark is trying to get off. Yep.
I'm sorry, what was the specific question again?
So we have one USCIS office in the state, and we have like 40% of the people eligible for
Right.
citizenship in the Mid-Willamette Valley. We would love a new USCIS office here on McGilchrist, especially that co-locates with Social Security and the VA on McGilchrist. So how do we best advocate for that? Is that something we really put on our agenda, or is that something we just speak to our individual members of Congress about?
So I would put it on the federal agenda. I think that's something in there. You have on your agenda, you'd have, like whatever your congressional directed spending requests are going to be, a limited focused set of a couple of projects that we're going after specific earmark funding on. And I think something like this slots in kind of directly beyond that. It's a specific goal. It's something that can be accomplished. It's something that Salem really should be taking the lead on. It's not something abstract that's like going to help all cities around the country or all cities in the state of Oregon or something like that. I would put it on the federal agenda, and then it's something whenever we're talking with our delegation, it's kind of right there front and center for them to see. And it's something for them to kind of work on, and we can pursue that all avenues in order to go after it.
Thank you. That's very helpful. I could, just for context, I know that Eugene and Medford are also vying for it as well. So, and I know that the chances of us getting more than one are pretty limited. The only one that we have currently is up in the Pearl District in Portland. It creates a huge burden for our residents. So thank you.
Absolutely.
Josh, do you want to walk through the other two things? So
Sure. And I think these might fit better in the policy statement as opposed to calling it a priority.
good.
But just to basically maintain the city's ability to issue tax refund bonds. And then we don't think about it much, but maintain the state and local tax deduction for taxpayers. So the taxes that we issue are deductible for people and their income taxes. So, or policy statement.
Easy. We'll add that, and I'll put it in track changes so that you can see it when we next get together.
And is that all to feds, or is that the feds or state?
Those are directed toward the feds. There's some version with the state.
So may I go back and ask a question on the refinancing on the bonds? Is that something that then they support us with, or how does that happen?
So right now that we're not allowed to do that. We used to be able to do that. I think it happened 5-6 years ago that the building was taken away. So it's a big national effort to be able to get that back, that advance refunded.
And does that then get subsidized to be able to do it? Do they pay some sort of fee to allow that?
For advance refund? No, it's just our ability to refund them. There's no other interaction.
Why was it taken away?
So when we issue bonds, someone buys a bond and they expect a certain return, right? So if we refund it early, they lose out on some of that return. That's the challenge, right? So it's our advantage to refund it and get a better interest rate, but the actual person who buys the bond, they miss out on some of that return. So it's a balance between those.
Okay. So they basically Congress sacrificed local governments for the benefit of the investors. Okay, got it.
I love it when you tie everything up in like this really great little book.
Well, that sounds like trying to, yeah,
Yeah, that's why I was wondering if they subsidize it.
yeah, no,
Because-
we do.
Because somebody's.
We're paying the price. This is the local government is paying the price.
Correct.
That's the bottom line. Okay,
The Land and Water Conservation Fund, this is about parks funding and having more of allowing more funding to trickle down into.
is this a federal thing or a state thing?
I think it is a federal thing that goes through OPRD,
Which is a state thing.
Okay,
but if there, so it could be both the federal dollars to OPRD and then how OPRD is allocating them amongst, just
so
sort of.
what I'm trying to figure out, Courtney, is like, who are we asking for who are we
I
asking? here?
understand.
Okay,
And I think that it's a federal ask,
okay,
but I will confirm with our staff person who's not here today.
okay.
And then Trevin, this one slipped in and I wonder if you want to address it. There's a pinch point between getting these resources and not being able to maintain them. So do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so usually when we're looking at like cops grants for more officers, they have a limited funding mechanism, so we have to be able to fully fund them after 3, 5 years, what have you. And so having that recurring revenue in order to do that becomes difficult, and so we're always leery of taking on those extra officers or using that federal funding to hire without knowing at the end whether or not we'll be able to keep them or come up with funding for that. So typically we're leery of those types of grants, especially right now when we have vacancies already. It's not necessarily probably where we want to spend our federal lobbying time on something like that when we already have those funding mechanisms, but we're happy to explore that further. And then
But just, I totally get it, and I get that cops grants are really to help Congress feel good about themselves, that they're supporting local law enforcement, but they really, at the end of the day, don't. But at this point, we're kind of desperate, so I think it's time to rethink that and to just say, you know what? We're gonna take all the money we can get that's gonna help offset other things in our general fund, even if it's just for 3 or 5 years, because
yeah, and right now with the climate, we potentially could see that where we would have the turnover would allow for that, but we'd already be accepting that money. We wouldn't actually be having the community kind of layoffs. Whereas I think earlier in the early aughts, we probably would have seen that with hiring that level. So we're happy to explore it further and keep going. And then additionally, there's a lot of so for procedural justice and community policing, there's usually some kind of backing that we can get, or where people are going to provide statistical assistance to us that we wouldn't normally have. So usually programs or startup programs where we can have analytical capacity added to any kind of programs we want to start. Oftentimes where we lack the ability to follow through or track those grants, or oftentimes as well, there's usually a startup component where we may already be doing it and they don't want to have an ongoing program that then they step into, is that they want to start something up. We've looked at those in the past with our crisis response teams, things of that nature, where we were already established. They wanted to have a startup, so we didn't qualify. But any kind of analytical support would be great, where we could participate in the project either locally or federally, where we would be a host site. We'd be happy to assist in that. We just gotta kind of see where one lands and if we fit into that. Usually those very narrow scopes.
thank you.
The next one is a state issue. It's the finding some way to keep gas tax revenue for streets, maintain operations and maintenance funding. And I think we had a good conversation yesterday with ODOT leadership about their intent to do something similar. And there might be an opportunity for us to partner. So not building new, but instead taking care of what we have. There might be a good opportunity for us. Okay, so that's the universe of things that we think might be important. You can see there's a list of things that we've currently submitted for, and then in plan to submit, As further evidence that this is a working draft, you can notice that Downs Tower should not be shown there. That's one that I think we're taking off, because brick, we don't want to have too many applications for brick at once, so
So that's coming off.
that's coming off. There will be a new version of this that will be better.
Okay.
Are there any comments, questions, concerns, any, sort of how this list hits you, reactions? Ideas, suggestions?
I think it's all good. Again, I'm gonna repeat what I say every time one of these lists comes out. We have to put our sheltering programs at the top of this list, even though it's only symbolic, and I know this isn't prioritized. I want to list it first.
Excellent. Other feedback?
I feel water infrastructure is critical, so I'd like that to be at least next on the list.
Anything that you want to take off or that we didn't already talk about or that needs to be added?
Just recognizing again, iterative process, so
No,
I'm trying to.
just the Front Street Rail,
Yeah, that's.
you know, that's something that we need to support in the next session to get the study going, because it doesn't make sense to pursue money for something that hasn't been studied. And
So you're wanting to take that off of the future list?
I just
and put it
want to
on-
note that study has to go first.
Okay.
We really need to focus in on supporting that extension study.
So you're talking about West?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's different than Front Street Rail Improvement in my mind. Those are two different things. I mean, they go together,
Yeah.
Yes,
but in my mind, Front Street Rail Improvement is getting that area ready for redevelopment, whereas West is about actually bringing that commuter line down.
and that would be a state.
And that, yeah, I like both.
Yes.
Yeah, a state focus, so,
Well, I think they can be both. Some of the, I think in some ways, in terms of the West, that's a potential federal issue
for the study,
for the study.
So-
Yeah,
so we can be working these things from multiple angles all the time. And I think we just have to have a little bit more refinement. Front Street Rail obviously means different things to different people, so we can improve that.
Yeah, we need to finish our work there and understand what the needs are.
right.
And where are we at that one?
Consultant?
Yeah, we have a consultant looking
Yeah.
at all the rail information. There's a diagnostics meeting coming. I don't know if that happened already, but it's.
We still have ways to go there.
We have ways to go to see what they're gonna require for all that process.
And Mark and the gang, you guys know what the West is, right? You understand the issue with the. Okay, just want to make sure the problem.
And we took them down Front Street and
Oh,
showed
great,
them the
that's
lay
great.
of the land,
That's
the issues that were there.
Cool, thank you.
Any other feedback? So we'll refine the Front Street, the way we're describing it. Probably have a design. And put the construction below the line.
Yeah,
And then West, continued support the West.
yeah, that sounds good to me.
I'm really glad to see the resiliency hubs on here. This is something that Counselor Barney and I have been talking about a lot, so it's nice to see that there. Even though it's far away.
Are you aware that we're partnering with the Sustainable Cities Year program to explore that? Okay, good.
Yeah.
Exactly, things to something.
Yes, and Councilman Jacob, the press release is waiting for Wyden and Berkeley to provide quotes. Okay. Because they are responsible for some of the funding.
Yeah, I appreciate all the bike and ped infrastructure stuff on here. I think it's great. I really want a t-shirt that says boardwalks for beavers on there. I think we could sell them and make some money.
That could be
a project.
a marketing campaign for some.
Be like, I don't want that when we were kids, so when I was a kid.
Oh,
Ow.
When I was a kid and we did the thing where they remolded the old man, really.
That was like 15 years ago. Nobody was a kid then.
Anyway, I see this as a kid project. Something we could get people involved.
and I was
I
once
see
a
it as a
kid.
non-age.
I'm
We
learning.
digress. Okay,
It's perfect.
do you need anything else from us on that?
No, the input is great and thank you so much for your time and we'll be back. I think August 28th was our next intended conversation.
Did we need to talk about that housing production thing?
Yes, I was just gonna round out this portion.
Okay, so,
And I'm
great.
moving into next steps.
Great.
Excellent. So we, the city has been invited to provide input, we being, UNISCAN, has been invited to provide input on the, governor's, housing production focus. There might be some fixes or some adjustments to some of what's currently, out. And so we, the city, have been invited to provide feedback. And we wanted just to see whether you might want to participate in that. It is the governor's office asking, and it will be a response that will be interpreted to be the city of Salem. And just to avoid any opportunity for going sideways, we wondered whether you would want to have a smaller subgroup working on that response quickly.
And just for a little bit more context, she was asked a question yesterday at the bill signing about potential special session to deal with some of these issues. And she very clearly said she's really focused on the short session, and not, so it sounds like a special session is not on the table on this topic, so.
It's either September would be the deadline for the short, if it does go to short, or November for the long. So there is an urgency to providing some of that.
Yeah, we absolutely want to participate in that.
Yeah.
I can't imagine that we would say no to that invitation.
I have a question about how you'd like to be involved.
So they're asking specifically for Eunice, or do they want, I'm not 100%
They
clear
are
on-
asking for Eunice,
Okay,
and I'm conscious of how it would be the city's feedback. And
right.
I wondered whether you all wanted to be involved on something that might be heading to the governor's office as feedback from the city.
I feel like Eunice can handle it, and I just think that she needs to stay in regular contact with me and or Virginia, and we can keep the rest of the members of the committee just up to speed. Yeah,
Keep Kristen and myself
yeah,
informed and.
and we can help navigate.
Yeah.
Which is what I think that you're asking us to do, just help navigate, and we can do that.
Good.
I do need to share that. I got a last minute invite from the home builders last Thursday about a meeting that was held on Monday with public works directors. So it was a subject matter expert on housing production and one of the smaller committees. So I did attend that meeting.
Great.
It was just a lot of dialogue between them, different public works directors talking back with some of the ideas that they were proposing. And one of the things they questioned was, can you wrap all the public improvement phases of the processing in with the land use application to try and shorten the time frame versus having to extend it? And I think that the feedback generally was, maybe that's an option. So if you choose to do that, you could do that. The developers' concerns are they don't want to spend too much engineering cost up front in the land use process, but if you move that up into the land use process, then you got to spend all the engineering costs to meet the timelines.
When you say with other public works directors, is that from around Marion and Polk counties, or is that from around the state?
It was around the state.
Okay, because there's a very public conversation going on right now in Portland specifically about all, the permitting processes and all of that, and all around housing production, so.
I think the request for the governor's office for city participation is because there's a perception the majority of the housing production strategy work groups are largely builders who are being asked to step up. So there was just a sort of do we need to talk to cities a little bit? That's sort of what's happening with Eunice's involvement.
Gotcha.
And then it goes,
All right, so I think you have your direction there.
Thank you.
Yep.
And so it was August 25th that we are next scheduled to regroup. And so is that? Oh, good. And so what we would be doing would be bringing back a refined list for you. We should probably return with the policy statements that have been guiding our lobbying efforts for the last couple of sessions. And then we would be looking to fall probably by November to really sort of button up those agendas, including having some really pretty flyers for upcoming visits to DC to pitch our projects. So that's our next step. Excellent.
Anything else? All right. Thanks, everybody.
Very well done. Thank you
Thank
for your
you for
time.
joining us from DC. See you soon.
Thank you. Have a good weekend.
Thank you.